All right, I am here too with Ash Withers, who is a content strategist that we are working with, and she is going to be walking us through the foundational work she's done so far for our GitLab Tone of Voice project. Ash, you can take it away again.
Hello, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
All right.
Okay. Can you see everything?
I can.
Okay, cool. So just to start off, this is what we're calling for the tone of voice seat at the table. Working title, we can change it if you are not into it. I like the idea of the acronym being SAT because it just kind of works really well with the spectrum that you'll see below. So just to kind of, this is the narrative. There's a room with a table where all the decisions happen. The person we're speaking to has never been invited to this room, but should be. We're the old friend with connections who will help unlock that door. Pull up a chair, we'll say to them, to the room. This is the one I've been telling you about. So I feel like this here kind of works for a couple of reasons with GitLab. What I really like about GitLab, and I think what everybody likes, is the open, transparent culture and really making an inclusive work environment that doesn't thrive on ego or, you know, the hierarchy that normal businesses have. So I feel like by inviting people to the table with our tone of voice, we're empowering them and making them feel like the business and the product is something that they can be a part of. So with this, I'm proposing a relaxed, straightforward tone of voice that's oddly familiar, authentically empathetic, and refreshingly forthcoming. And you'll see with the traits that I've included, which are basically riffs on some of the notes that you provided with those traits. I just expanded a little bit on those. But this is getting into what Becky had mentioned about in the slide with the life cycle. So this is the initial introduction of that life cycle, and then it goes later into breaking that down based on the actual content journey. So we have standing, seated, and at the table. So these little quotes that you'll see here at the bottom, this isn't actually an example of necessarily what we would ever say. This is really just to kind of infuse the feeling of what this part of the journey looks like. So for standing, we're inviting them and introducing them while providing essential information. Seated, we're offering an inclusive perspective on an exclusive space. So that's kind of what we had talked about. And then at the table is the empowered voice, where we're providing resources and outlets for innovation and leadership. So, and this will align closely with that life cycle journey. I have the at the table quote in gray because I don't really feel like that's as strong as it could be. I'd like to infuse a little bit more of the clever trait, which you'll see as we move towards the life cycle. So that's a work in progress. This value alignment section, I would like to also add a couple more bullets for each of these points, but this is really a jumping off point. So looking at the credit values for GitLab, this is basically how we're going to bring the tone of voice and align it with these different values. So for collaboration, we're inviting success by putting the dev at the center of the journey. And this is part of what you provided in your background and notes, Erica. So then for results, we're using customer results to empower devs. So this is something that I'll expand on when we get to the specific examples. Providing for efficiency, providing accessible resources for self-learning. And I'll actually expand on this part a little bit in the foundational stuff below. Diversity, creating inclusive documentation that caters to every learning style, which I think is important. We can actually create, potentially paths on the website that help lead people in these directions. There was something I was looking at with, I don't know, you may be familiar with Code Academy. And I really like how they have a quiz that users can take on the homepage that kind of helps them figure out where to start. And I feel like something similar could be done with the documentation and kind of where to start and how they learn best and pointing them in the right direction. And then also celebrating our devs by sharing their stories through our content. So that's where the hero stuff comes into play on social and whatnot. For transparency, creating straightforward, benefits-driven content that provides honest information over gimmicky copy, and then providing content platforms and resources for thought leadership and innovation.
Can I stop you on one point here in the transparency? Because this is really important to me, and I think to the GitLab tone of voice, the prioritizing honest information over gimmicky copy. Is there a way, and maybe it's enough to just have it here or you cover it further, that piece is something I'd like to pull out as like a really high priority when it comes to how we write and speak. This was part of, I think, the notes that I sent you, the like clarity over cleverness or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I love it here. I'm just wondering if there's a way to surface it even higher as like, if there's one thing you do, it's this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight that. I love it. I think it makes a lot of sense there. I feel like it's something maybe that we just reiterate in multiple places across the tone of voice of like a reinforcement of like, when we communicate, we're always trying to be clarity over cleverness.
Yes. And I think, I totally feel that, because that's some of what I've started to include here. And also here, I think this point you'll really like. So yes, and then absolutely in the expanding with the specific information, we can prioritize that for sure.
Awesome.
So this, I'm excited about this. If you don't like it or you want to kind of change directions, totally fine. This is so sat as a human. So this is kind of like, if we think of it, not necessarily as a mascot, but if we were humanizing our voice and saying, this is who this person would be who's speaking. So I'm proposing Devon. And the reason is it kind of embodies that gender inclusivity and that way of writing. So I'm suggesting in the documentation, we actually write it like this. So like meet Devon and then announce the pronouns they, them, and then kind of get into it from there. So Devon is the one who listens more than talks. They're honest and uncomplicated, humble, but sometimes stubborn. Their jokes are subtle, but never at the expense of others. Devon's passionate about inclusivity and amplifies unheard voices over their own. Devon's hardworking, but values free time. They're interested in life hacks and using data to improve their habits. They're always learning and openly sharing what they know without knowing it all. Devon is an early adopter who appreciates function and isn't necessarily into flashy tech. They have an analytical mind and respect facts more than feelings. Devon is measured in their decisions, thoroughly researching every major purchase. They were the first one to invest in cryptocurrency, and while they've built a sizable portfolio, they still wear the same 5 shirts. So this is actually, just browsing through Twitter and the followers, looking at the bios of people and kind of how they interact on social. This is kind of what I pulled together. And it's also, to be honest with you, a little bit of a profile of my husband, who I feel like is actually kind of the target audience as well. He's an engineer. So I just feel like these qualities are something that I've recognized in the target audience of GitLab. And I've included these really specific details with like the cryptocurrency and things like that, because not only is that something that I noticed in some of the followers, but I feel like it also really shows how humble this kind of tone of voice can be. And so yeah, that's the reasoning behind there. And if you have any thoughts on that, let me know and I'll take notes here.
I love this. I think it's, when we're talking about tone of voice, super important to humanize that, because to some people, if they can't latch on to anything else here, they'll latch on to this. And I also, you know, the humble but sometimes stubborn is something that I'm stuck on, because I like it, because in order to personify or humanize something, like we have to have some flaws too, right? I think, yeah, I mean, I think this is an area I'll probably sit on for the rest of the day and just leave some comments. But overall, I really like where you're taking this. And it, you know, doing the kind of gender neutral person, the they, them pronouns, it just embodies and encompasses, I think, a lot of our values at GitLab. So I love it. I'll keep reading through it and leave some comments too in the next 24 hours if there's any areas where I'm like, can we expand on this a little bit or include this? But overall, I think it's really great.
Yeah, and maybe even with the word stubborn, which can sometimes have a negative connotation, maybe uncompromising would be a better word, or something similar to that, where it's just showing that, I think, you know, one of the words that you had put was like opinionated or decisive, which I infused into some of the traits. So that was what I was trying to showcase with that. But I definitely see too how that can be a word that kind of turns people off sometimes. And I want this to mostly be a positive human, you know,
I think
trait.
a sentence after it, maybe contextualizing it might help. But I like the word stubborn, because we are talking about GitLab. Like, this is GitLab's point of voice, and GitLab is stubborn. We are opinionated. There are things like we release every month on, oh my gosh, how am I going to forget it? The 20th, without fail, no matter what. We dog food our product without fail, no matter what. We are, you know, there are certain things where, like, whether it's uncompromising or you could call it stubborn, we are. So I think this captures that really well. And I like that word. I think, like I said, just a sentence after maybe giving an example of what that means so that it doesn't cause a negative feeling. Yeah,
you actually just jogged my brain a little bit. So I think maybe something about routine. So like, and that's again, something I noticed with my husband, he's very like routine oriented. So like that's what I kind of think of when I think of this person being stubborn, is more or less like having their certain way of doing things and doing it really well. All right, so this is probably one of my favorite parts. It's taking the traits that I'm going to show here in the life cycle, and this might mean that I actually might flip-flop these sections because I haven't really introduced the traits yet, I'm just realizing. So these are the traits that I'm proposing. Let me, just knowing this, let me scroll down here first. So this is what Becky had included in the life cycle. So I laid it out kind of in the same way as the design. So looking back at the tonal spectrum, we have standing, seated, and at the table. Basically, I've taken the words that you had introduced before. I tweaked them just a little bit because I wanted to show, instead of just saying, you know, friendly, I tried to think of what are the exact traits that would embody, you know, this type of quality. Same with trustworthy. If you say trustworthy, that could mean so many things. So I wanted to say like this plus this plus this equals this. And so that's where I'm coming from with like knowledgeable, relatable, honest, practical. Some of the ones that I wanted to call out are clever, and again, decisive, which kind of brings up that stubborn aspect, and aspirational. And I'll expand on those a little bit more above and below this, but I'll come back to this when
Can we actually go back to that view for just 1 second?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand. So the words that are really light gray, is that just saying like these different categories build on each other? So seated includes those, but also aspirational.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And if there's a way that I could make that more clear, just let me know. But this was kind of what Becky had. She had it with the light gray, so I was just kind of riffing on that. And yeah, it's just kind of including all of those across the board, but building on them as you go through the life cycle. And then, so when we're looking at humanizing the tone of voice, here's where we're matching the traits to Devon and then some other dev. So now you can kind of see Devon is written that way, not just to be gender neutral, but also Devon, the developer. So we have knowledgeable. Devon trades fun facts where some other dev interrupts with superfluous insights. Oh, I think we all know that person. Relatable, Devon finds common ground, whereas the other dev finds higher ground. Honest, Devon prioritizes the truth versus some other dev lies by omission. And I think that's really, really important and kind of hits on some of what you're looking for with the honesty and the transparency, because I think when you're creating the narrative as a business, there's always that tendency to put that information that's going to make the business look the best. And I think part of transparency is making sure you're including the most truthful information, even if it doesn't always benefit the business. And so that you're creating and setting expectations with the customers that are going to like really make them trust you more over time, because you're setting that expectation from the start so that they're not getting the software and getting on there and just so confused and this is not what I signed up for type of thing. Practical, Devon creates a to-do list. Some other dev creates a to-don't list. So that's like a more negative person. This is like a more positive, and how can we solve this problem? Devon is aspirational. They're a daydreamer, whereas some other dev is a dream crusher, always looking for ways to not do something. Or so Devon is decisive. They thoughtfully consider something versus some other dev impulsively responds. And then clever, this is part of like where I was saying, let's call out that, because that's something a little, not quite quirky isn't the word I want to use, but something where we're infusing a little bit more personality. So Devon is low-key funny and thoughtful, whereas some other dev is high-key sarcastic and pretentious. When I think of what clever could be, I look at, you know, that social example that Becky or the social team had included in the tone of voice slide, which was, you know, I Need a Hero, that song. Somebody had kind of like written that in a social post, something like that, bordering on dad jokes, but not quite as punny, just like little tiny nuggets that are just peppered throughout that gives, you know, a little bit more personality than just, you know, all of these friendly qualities. And I think that will kind of set the tone apart, and we can get into that with some more specific examples that I'll provide, which I don't have yet. I just want to get your alignment on all of this. So again, looking at this, now you can kind of understand a little bit more where these are coming from. And here's where this is like the traditional do this, not that, that you'll see with the tone of voice, but I really liked instead saying we embrace versus we reject, because it feels like that like thought leader, innovator type mindset. So we embrace guided exploration as a way of learning. We reject prescriptive information that sounds good but has little substance. We embrace the challenges of each dev as if they were our own. We reject assuming that we've absolutely solved these challenges with our product. So I think that's really important. It comes back to like the truthfulness versus lying by omission, and the spirit of always learning. So we're learning from the developers, we're iterating, we're, continuing to kind of grow. We embrace the truth, even if it doesn't benefit us to freely share it. I think you might like this one. We reject gatekeeping information to create a false sense of dependency. I think that's so important, like withholding information throughout the journey. This is the spirit of transparency, is being as upfront as possible throughout the journey, never holding back and saying, you're gonna really love this once it comes out, and not really providing much information on what this is, or just really keeping them updated along the way. We embrace actionable resources for innovation that feature clear steps and working examples. We reject publishing vague, unorganized ideas that frustrate and confuse. And so these are all what you see here with Gray. I need to still fill out these examples, but the ones above are actually all based on the tone of voice traits. So it's another way of kind of expanding on those a little bit more. So this is where I'm at so far with all the foundational stuff. And now here's where we get into the rest of this. So I have this to-do list for next steps. So adding a section of specific examples of the life cycle copy. So looking at, what it would look like through all of these. This is one thing that I wanted to touch base on specifically, because I don't want to step on anybody's toes if I'm like writing a tone of voice for, social copy, or for like a quick blurb in a blog or anything like that. So if there's something specifically that you'd like me to focus on, otherwise I can provide specific examples for any of those things.
I think it would probably be helpful to use an example for kind of like each type, like you're talking about. I know that social pulled together a lot of what they've already done. I think like for this, it's totally okay to find existing stuff that we really like. And I can look into like our demand gen assets and blogs and pull some stuff out for you to look at. So that would be my suggestion here, is like, if we can find stuff that already exists that we feel like embodies this, if we can't, let's rewrite something. But I have a feeling like there's nuggets out there that we can include or like adapt pretty easily. And that way, because that's a lot of work to try to come up with an example for all these things yourself too. So let's try to repurpose here and adapt if needed. But I think yes to having an example kind of like per thing we might do, because that's something that people like. I could see that being the most used piece of this is like, okay, I've like read through it, but now I need to go write something, and every time I need to go write something, I go reference these examples just to like remind myself. So 100% yes to including it.
Okay. And with that, I also thought it would be cool to include a branded word bank. So a lot of tone of voice guides will have like, say this, don't say that. And so a list of words not to use, like maybe I frequently see for like tech companies, don't use like cutting edge, or like these empty kind of overly branded words.
Software is eating the world. Let's not say that again.
Yeah. So different things like that. What words not to use, but most importantly, words to use that kind of infuse the brand tone of voice and embody the values.
Okay.
So let's see. Adding a section with content opportunities / series. So this is something I kind of had mentioned before, but like I could provide suggestions of different types of content that could help bring the tone of voice one step further. One thing that I think would be really cool is an infographic that helps an admin, say, who's like in the decision-making process, look at like what type of architecture would be best for their user setup / group setup project. And it would be cool to do that as something like a flow chart that, there's a series of yes, no questions. And you could really include the Devon personality kind of in something like that, because it's a little fun. And I know that we're running over time here, I think. So if you have to jump, just let me know.
I have a few extra minutes. We can keep going.
Okay. So that was the idea there. And then aligning some of this stuff with the buyer's journey that you had created. So looking at specific examples of, how we can drive action, reinforce the decision. So like all of these things with little blurbs that kind of align with this tone of voice. And then the narrative section, this is something that is like a nerdy passion of mine, and I think we could make it really cool. Think of the narrative section as kind of like a mission statement, but more specific to the tone of voice. And I think it would be really fun to frame it as, how to explain GitLab. And this is something that is in the style guide currently. They have how to explain GitLab in this many words, and this many words, and this many words. I want to break it out into something a little bit more human for the overall tone of voice. And so how to explain GitLab to your kids, your parents, your partner / spouse, your best friend, your coworkers, your boss. And I know that seems like a lot, but actually it would just be like a quick little elevator pitch for each of these. But it's really kind of a fun way to create a tool for like customers and employees to share the narrative in meaningful ways. Because a lot of times, you'll have at the dinner table with your family, you're trying to explain what you do for work, and you don't really have the exact words, especially to explain it to like a layman who wouldn't necessarily be familiar with the culture. So I think this would be a really great way to break it down one step further and really seal the deal with the whole tone of voice. And then with that in mind, I've got the points here that you had given me with the background information that would be infused in this narrative component.
I love it. I think this is great. With the narrative section, so I'm going to share this video in the issue and in some channels too. We're kind of working side by side with corporate marketing on a messaging guide. So I think when you said style guide, you were actually referring to our product marketing messaging, where it's like GitLab is a complete DevOps platform delivered as a single application, one sentence, media message, long message. So we're taking that and like adapting it for like a top of funnel corporate message. So I would say, and I'm making an assumption that the bullets that are listed in the to-do section, you're going to go through like top to bottom. I love this. I think it would be a great way to sum up the tone of voice, just like you said. I just want to float this by the team and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts here if we do that.
Absolutely.
To me, there's a difference here because you're not, with the narrative section, it's not like these are our headlines and how we talk to like explain it to press and things like that. It's really taking it and thinking of these different audiences. So to me, it's different, but let me just share the video and get some feedback before you start working on this section.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and my thinking with this specifically and why I feel like it's so fun for GitLab is so like work-life balance focused, and I like the idea of including these people who are in your life and finding ways to explain your work to them and showing like who you are as part of this, and who you are as a customer who might be interested in something like this.
Yeah, no, I really like this. We actually do have Rebecca Dodd, who manages our blog, wrote a blog post like how to explain GitLab to anyone like 4 years ago using a newspaper analogy. So let me track down that blog post and send it to you. Yeah. There might be one other one. I want to say Brendan O'Leary, who's a developer evangelist on our team, may have written an adapted version too. So there might be two, but I'll look into that. I know there's for sure one for you to reference. And it'll actually be interesting to look at because that was written before GitLab, the product, was as like robust as it is. But I think it still holds true. I think she did a really good job of like simplifying the concept So yeah, I'll find that and the other one if it exists for you and send those to you.
Okay, that's great.
But I think this is great. I think you've done a really awesome job capturing like the notes that I gave you, the notes that the social and the corporate team gave you, and really making it concise and come to life too. Sorry, I'm on a 1 cup of coffee a day kick, and it's not working very well. Black tea does not have as much caffeine as coffee, it turns out. Yeah, this is great. I love it. And I'm going to stop the recording too, so then we can wrap up.